Welcome to Leadership Rocks episode number 3. We've got the Serverless Guru leadership team here. We've got marketing, we've got sales, we've got operations, we've got engineering, we've got all aspects of Serverless Guru from the ground to the ceiling, from the bottom to the top. And we're going to be talking about a list of topics today, probably jumping into new things. If you saw episode number 1 and episode number 2, then you're probably familiar with our kind of nonchalant improv setup. If you're not, definitely watch those ones on our YouTube channel. And so with that in place, wait, should we do intros?
Yes. Who do we have on? Who do we have talking here?
Yeah. All right, Josh, who are you?
Exactly. Who am I? I am Josh Proto, Chief Operating Officer, Serverless Guru. If everything's like it's going well, you're very, very welcome. Good to be here as always.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan McGroot. I'm a marketing manager here at Serverless Guru, and I love big, comfy cardigans.
All right.
Hey, I'm Alex. I'm VP of Engineering here at Serverless Guru. Yep.
Sweet. And I am Ryan Jones. Nice to meet everyone. Founder of Serverless Guru and avid surfer. Getting into exercising a little bit more now, which is great. So I feel good. Sunny outside, like always. Sometimes it feels like Groundhog Day here in Puerto Rico, just because it's never different. It's always the same, but luckily it's a good same. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Segue. First topic. Would you rather work 80 hours one week and have the next week off, or work 40 hours for the week, spread across 7 days, including weekends, for 2 weeks? What do y'all think? Who wants to jump in first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Let's do it. Okay, let's see. So 80 hours for 1 week, but I have the next week off, or 40 hours for the week spread across 7 days for 2 weeks. I wonder what would that hour breakdown be? I'm not good at math.
I think it's like 5.7 hours a day if you do it like 40 hours across 7 days.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. 80 hours and then have the next week off. I feel like that sounds great in like, I guess, but would that be like my schedule all the time? Because like if you miss a whole week of work and then you come back to the next week of work, then it's just gonna be like a hectic 80 hours of work. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm not the personality that can like willingly miss without like having like a purpose to. Like if I was going on vacation, I think I could, but I think if like I couldn't, or I wasn't going on vacation, I was just at home like wondering all the things I was missing. I think my personality fits better with like 7 days a week, 5 hours. Like I know other countries have started implementing that where it's like you go to work, I think, for longer hours but fewer days or something, but they really structure it so that you get like the whole 40 hours a week. I think that makes more sense to me. I don't know if I could do 80 hours and then recover enough within the week to not stress about what am I missing. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's a feeling you guys can empathize with.
I think there's even places where they just like throw out like 8 hours. They're just like, no, it's only gonna be like 32 hours a week. Work 4 days, and then like that's it. Like have a 3-day weekend, or you're just working like 4 or 5 hours a day, and then it rounds off or something.
Days,
Yeah, I feel like for me, like I think about it as like, I think the 40-hour work week started back in the Industrial Revolution with like Ford factory lines. I believe that's the story of it. And so if that is true, obviously fact check that, but if that is true and it did start because of that, then we're kind of just working off this really outdated scheme of like how productivity works. And it's like, look at the school system, for instance. It's like you put like 30 kids in a class, you teach them all the same stuff, and it's like that's been the same format for the past 100 years or more. And it's the same thing for like working life and all that stuff. And so I think there's more research that's been done around like deep work, for instance, and like when it comes to like writing a book or doing something that's like requires, like maybe solving some unsolved math problem, right? You can only be doing that type of work for like 3 hours a day. And it's because like you have a battery of focus, and as you're using it throughout the day, it dwindles down to a point where you're no longer able to do that type of deep work. And so you can, even if you had the perfect environment set up, even if you blocked out the windows and you stopped all notifications, you had everything off and you're focused on that one thing, you still only got about like 3 hours. And that's like Nobel Peace Prize people that are like at the top of the field. And so the idea that we're supposed to put in 8 hours of highly productive work I don't know how accurate that is anymore, other than just like we do things in society based on comfort level, and that feels like something it's more comfortable and easy to understand 8 hours versus 3 or 4 hours, and we're not really measuring the results either, and so it's kind of just like so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where it's like, you can step back, and I can think of like every job that I've had before, and then like at Serverless Guru, and it's like if you are trying to squeeze like that, especially like what even like at a factory at like a real like service level position, it's sort of like someone's getting lied to at the end of the day. Is as far as like, we all know that like each hour of work that someone can do is not like weighed equally. So it's just like, what is truly like the goal that's being measured, and what is like the most efficient way. And that should be the goal, rather than like you need to work X amount of hours. Like I remember when I was in retail, and I learned about fluffing the merchandise, and it's something that like, on days when there was literally nothing to do, you still were expected to be walking around. You could never sit, and you would just fluff the merchandise, just sort of fluff the merchandise, or go over to like the shirts or the shoes, and then just sort of like, just sort of like you're fluffing a pillow. Just make sure it's like fluffy, and like, oh, let's do it, just to sort of give this illusion of like professionalism to the business. So there is like a value in that way, but it is just like really, really interesting. Like, is that really the most valuable moment of that person's time? Especially as someone like last week, I like took a day off, and it was fantastic. I took Friday off, and I came back Monday, and I was just like so productive, and I probably did just like so many like key critical things, and I could think like ahead, like for the end of the year, and I got some of those on my task list done that I probably wouldn't have thought about if I was just sort of like grinding through. So it's such like a very interesting question. I think for me, it's like, would I rather work 80 hours one week and have the next week off? I don't think I could. If I had to do 80 hours in 1 week, very rare occasions have I ever had to do that. But it's like, those are like stressful times. Like you need to take a week off. And then by the time you're sort of back in it, you definitely feel behind. So I can really relate to what you said, Jonathan. I would certainly opt for just like 40 hours. Let's do like 5 or 6 hours each day, and then and figure it out that way.
Nice, man. Yeah, awesome. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's like a balance here, and I think preference-wise, everyone has different work style and how they operate day to day. For me personally, I think like discipline and routine is very important to me, and my body like adapts to that feel, and whatever I'm doing day to day is repeated again in the same format or same time duration. And I have this really bad habit of my alarm's at 6 in the morning, but I always wake up at 5:55 like clockwork every day, and it just wakes me up, and I get really pissed in the morning. It's like, I wish there was more time before I woke up to my alarm. But like that's just how my body operates, is that it just, once it's in that routine, like it just goes, and it gets comfortable being in that stage. And taking even a few days off of work is like, it's so difficult for me to like pull back and catch up, rather than spending those days day to day just checking on stuff. It becomes almost impossible for me to like catch up, and especially for a whole week. That'd be a terrible Monday the next week for sure. So my preference would be like having 30 hours a week, to be honest. And that comes with, you can spend less time but be more productive by being efficient. And I think most people don't realize that, is that you can always optimize for a better efficiency in terms of how much hours you spend in a day. So yeah, that's my opinion there.
Yeah, you saying that makes me think of like, or I think even like in the pre-show, Josh was talking a little bit about it, like doctors and other types of fields of like business have different operating hours, right? Like, right, it was like the 40-hour work week was based off of like just factory workers, right? You know what I mean? Like that became kind of like the standard from the Ford Industrial Revolution. But like then you have like professions like doctors and nurses, where they'll have like, they'll work for like 32 hours straight, but then have the next like 6 days off or something. You know what I mean? They'll have like shifts and blocks of time where they're like, all right, you come in and all you have to focus on and all you have to do for the next like 30 hours is work here, and then you have like X amount of days off. It's not like the the grind of like coming in and doing factory work or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's other like, or like people who are salaried even, right? Like they don't work based off of hours. They work based off of just like a salary for the year, right? My dad, I remember, was like a FedEx manager for years on salary, and he would like pull 60-hour weeks sometimes just because like it was just what the business demanded, but he didn't get paid extra or overtime. It just, he got paid a salary. So, you know what I mean? Like there's like different ways of doing it, but I don't know. It's just interesting seeing that like, you know, other countries are starting to implement different hourly wages, not wages, sorry, different like metrics for how long people work or how long people have to be at the business, and are seeing different results with it. Or even like professions like doctors and nurses, people that we like have to depend on don't work off the same like work schedule that the basic average person does. And it's like, is that more helpful for the doctors, less helpful for the people? Like why the differences and stuff?
Yeah, totally. I think that's partly where I wanted to jump in as well, which is like, I think I just wanted to make it very clear that there's like there's nuance to this conversation, and there's definitely like it's also like where you are in your career, right? And so, for instance, where I'm at in my personal career, it's that the pushing 80 hours a week actually has a deficit, or like it has a bad impact on where I am currently, because then I start making very high critical decisions too impulsively and without like the creative nuance and without the brainstorming aspect and all that stuff, and without patience. And that can have this really traumatic like ripple effect that it impacts a lot of people. And so right now it probably wouldn't be the best strategy for me to then be putting in an 80-hour week. However, when I was first starting in the industry and I wanted to rise up that really fast, there was no way for me to do that without working like really crazy hours. But I knew what the trade-off was there. And it was basically like, I'm going to sacrifice, you know, time with friends and family, and also hobbies, and also my health, to then move forward in my work career. And I was able to rationalize that. And I think that's up to every individual person to kind of make that, you know, decision. And there's no right way or wrong way. And it's also, everyone goes through cycles in their life where that changes. And so I just wanted to put some more like asterisks there that like, you know, nothing that we're saying is definitive. And I also wanted to bring up an interesting topic, which is based on what was being discussed, and that's around value creation. I think that a lot of times the way that we price work at the moment is, you know, based on hourly or salary, but not a lot based on like value creation, right? And I think that's maybe because we don't have the models in place and the understanding and the 50 years or 100 years of understanding what does that look like? What does value creation mean, right? And so maybe you can create value in an hour, right? Maybe you can create value in 30 minutes. And so maybe that value that you're creating is exponentially more than, let's say an example here, you have data entry, and then maybe you have somebody that's helping make a more like small decision that has a much bigger impact, right? And so for that specific paper, yeah, then maybe that makes sense. You know, what is this paper value at? And then maybe that's an hourly rate breakdown so the business still makes a margin and is able to handle other things, and that there's still motivation to keep it growing and all that stuff. But then once you move up in the hierarchy of a business and you start getting into more of like, my 30 minutes or my hour has like a downstream effect of X, and then how do you measure that, and how do you effectively structure for it? And I think that's a very interesting concept, which I hope, you know, and I think this is part of the cool thing of Serverless Guru, is that these type of topics are things that, you know, we float around and we bounce around. And who knows, maybe, you know, a decade from now, maybe, you know, one of us on this call is helping define what these type of new models might look like to support the evolution of, you know, the economy, right? And how people work. And so, yeah. So what are your thoughts on value creation versus salary versus hourly? And am I crazy? Am I off on like an island right now? I mean, physically I am, but mentally am I on an island?
I don't think so. I've had some like a project or an interesting visualization I think would be cool, at least within the realm of serverless, to also communicate value or like alternative value of what's happening is like what is it like and especially in terms of like the environment is like we can calculate like carbon footprint for like energy usage, and like as we know, like only being able to like pay for compute time is like such a very interesting and just like sometimes like definitely the optimal business solution, as well as like operational solution, but being able to sort of project, like, if you're instead using like your own, what is it? Like if you're using a virtual machine or using like an on-prem solution, like how much energy would that be using, but like how much carbon usage would that actually be? And then you could actually see by using like a serverless function, you actually would be saving like X amount of tons of carbon a year or something. Like that would be real. That would be like a really good way, I think, to communicate like extra value of some of the technology aspects of particularly what we do. But in a broader context, I think it's that sort of out of the box thinking that value is, and value is such like an amorphous term. Like I remember in college, I was talking about like entrepreneurship and business with like a sociology professor, and he was just like define value to me, and it is like a really good point. It's like, well, value to whom? Value in what context? And as entrepreneurs and as businesses and firms get to sort of define a bit like the nature of that value, and it's sort of hard. Like it forces you to be like a really good marketer or a good salesperson if you are like pricing yourself based on value, and it also assumes that the person you're talking to has like considerable understanding of the marketplace or the system they're working in. And if not, you have to educate them a bit about like, no, you don't understand. I'm thinking like 10 years in the future, or thinking about this future point in time, and then looking backwards from that. And then there's this value. And sometimes it's really hard, it's hard to communicate that sometimes, especially, if that person's working 80 hours in 1 week and doesn't have like the mental capacity to, or it's not their job or purview to be thinking of it in that way. But I think we need to be thinking about that to solve some of the critical problems that we have currently, like health epidemics, environment. Those are two very clear ones.
Yeah, man, that's awesome, Josh. I was just gonna say, like, thinking about like in the arts, or like people who are in like those kind of creative fields, hourly doesn't always quite work, right? Like it could be like a by per project model or something like that. So something that may take somebody like an hour with less experience, won't have the same value as someone who spends an hour with a lot of experience or with like a lot of weight behind them. Like there's a story that it just reminded me of. I think it was like Salvador Dali, really famous artist. Don't know if you guys ever heard of him. But there's a story of him classically going to like a bar or something and doing or I think it was Picasso, actually, like Pablo Picasso. He did like a sketch on a napkin or something, and like a cocktail napkin, and was going to go throw it away just because of this little doodle. And someone was like, "Hey, I will give you, like, I will pay for that napkin from you." And he goes, "Okay, $50,000." And they're like, $50,000? What do you mean? That just took you like 5 minutes to make? And he goes, no. It took me 50 years to make, because it's like all the value that and experience and his celebrity, everything that's brought to him to that point, that gave that napkin the value, right? It didn't just take him 5 minutes, and so you can't always measure productivity in that way or value in that way either, right? It also depends on like the experience the person's bringing, what impact culturally that person has or that project would have, and then Josh said, like, even environmentally, like being conscious of that. I remember even with like crypto and everything becoming big, that became a big like issue of like nifties and crypto and all that are really interesting emerging business or like a field, but like what is the environmental impact of that, value does that have? But that's getting off topic. I just wanted to bring up the cool like Pablo Picasso story, so I'm gonna shuffle
I was
off.
say I absolutely, that was the first thing that popped in my head when this conversation started. Like before you said the quote, I was like, oh, this sounds like the Pablo Picasso. Like I looked up Van Gogh because I couldn't remember who it was either. And then I looked it up while you were talking. I was like, that's what it is. Yeah, I love that. It's like it took my whole life to make this, and so yeah, that's a perfect example of where value-based pricing, and you're basically going, yeah, it took me 5 minutes. Actually, it took me my entire life. And if the result's the same as someone that takes them 50 hours. Right, you should pay potentially way more, because now you just save 50 hours of your time. You got it faster, so faster and same quality. Yeah, and that's really cool. Alex, what do you think on this?
I think it goes back to what you were saying, Ryan, that measuring value was based on labor and time, and that's due to the fact that we had we needed a way to do that during the Industrial Revolution, right? And it's a factory, typical factory worker, the best factory worker in the factory is not going to be 10 times better than other factory worker. It's just not physically possible. But in the world that we live in today, where creativity and any technology that is done through, you know, not physical labor to as intensive as factory, we need to start talking about how do we set these models to better evaluate value. The value should be based on the product itself, not how long or how much effort somebody has put in or time that they put into, which is a misconception in a way in the world that we live in today. Because an engineer, the best engineer, could be 1,000 times better than another engineer, and that's something that you don't see in any other industry. Just because this is such a creative yet technological experience where you can basically, you know, wire up a laptop and a internet, and you're able to basically do anything. And the value should not be determined on, you know, an expert who took certain amount of time to create something that should be worth at a certain amount. That's not the right model. So that's something that I think over time will probably have a change in terms of how we set that kind of expectation in terms of evaluating labor and value.
Yeah, and I think this is a really cool topic that you just brought up around engineers and productivity. And to those on the, you know, potentially that haven't seen this type of thing take place, you know, that maybe you're outside of that direct software development cycle, it can sound a bit like almost like a little bit arrogant or something. But I bought a book called Ask Your Developer, which was written by the Twilio CEO. I believe his name is Jeff Lawson. I think that's the right book. I've got somewhere back over there in my pile of books. And he talks about how, I think it was the Microsoft CTO, former CTO, mentioned that a developer can not be like 10 times more efficient or like 100 times more efficient, but can be like 10,000 times more efficient than other developers. And that sounds crazy, right? And that sounds just absolutely absurd. But if you've worked in the software field for a little bit and you've seen the difference in productivity, some people are coming strapped with full-on working platform apps. So you put that person, how long did it take to take a platform app? I don't know, a couple months. And so they're jump starting a couple month project in like a couple of days. Like that's the level of productivity acceleration that you can see. And so when you have people that already have all that experience and understanding, and they've been doing this for a long time, they can just, it's absurd. And so obviously the 10,000 example, the 1,000 example that Alex gave, those are, those are like subjective things, and it's not like purely measurable on that. But the key thing there is like people can be way more efficient, you know? And that's, it goes back to that whole thing of like, does the pricing system of yesterday make sense today? And if it doesn't, then how can we create the vocabulary and the models and the education required to help, you know, transition that system to potentially, you could say, a more fair society if we wanted to be, you know, more idealistic. I wanted to bring up another topic based on this. Can we solve problems from inside the system that created the problem?
Ooh, that's like that's the whole like idea of like, you know, if not to get too political, right? But like, you know, like the whole idea of like, you know, like there's a couple bad eggs or bad apples, and like, you know, with like in the police, right? Like there's a couple bad apples, but there's a couple people trying to like go within the system to change it. Like, you know, if there's enough good apples that outweighs the bad apples and stuff like that. And I don't know, I've never really been a believer in that system. I don't think it's like, you know, as much as I would want to struggle against like anything systematic, being within it and trying to do it within the system doesn't quite work because it's specifically designed to crush you, right? Like it's designed to not be changed or easily changed in that way. I don't know. I don't know if it's the same system if you get to change it, right? Like it's set up in a way that it operates the way it has to operate. And I don't see it changing just because there's someone in it trying to change it. It would have to be a completely different system in my brain, right? Like there had to be some kind of major reform, or like, you know, in the example of like the police, not to get too political, but like, you know, the idea that you can just change it by having good intentions doesn't quite address the things that are making it bad, right? Like if we were to have more people on staff in a police department who know more about mental illness or are better equipped at de-escalation, and people like come in with different systems of thought and things like that, it may have an impact. But like you would have to completely change the structure of how that place is operated and who you recruit, who you take in, and the whole system would have to change for it to, I don't know, start showing signs of that. But that might just be one like example that is hard to change because it's like a big system, right? Tinier systems might be easier to change within it. Like maybe you go to a small startup company and you can change the culture of it by being a productive worker and helping like get something going with it, right? You can inspire a small band of developers to like really step up if you have a really good project manager or something like that, but I don't know if that's necessarily a whole system change as it is like a small micro environment.
I think you bring up a really wise point, which is like, if you were able to change it, then is it really the same system anymore? I think that's like that's actually a really good point. I think probably a better question or I think a more accurate representation is like, I think it's more like you're either working outside of the system or you're improving the one that it is, or you're trying to improve what it is. Because I don't know if you are able to sort of dismantle it and like very much change it, then you are really changing the system. And like systems themselves are sort of insular, baked in with their own set of like processes and assumptions, and that sort of thing. And that's why like consultants are sometimes can be a beneficial thing, because you're bringing someone else or expertise that has a complete other set of assumptions and a fresh set of eyes in order to reevaluate something, and then creating sort of a strategy to go from there. I think, it's also something I think we've seen both, whether it's like socially, politically, or even on the job, just, intentions do not equal impact. I can intend to know this software programming language and intend to have this project go really well. But, at the end of the day, I'm going to have to be able to either write code or go to meetings and deal with people and find solutions. Like that work has to happen. And so it's sort of like, it makes me think like, well, how are we able to do things well? Or what are cornerstones of success? And there's always like some form of accountability, and like harsh accountability, not necessarily like through us in like a pejorative way, but if for the nature of our business, if we don't do a good job, we're not going to get hired again, and then we're going to lose contracts, and then the business doesn't work. So I sometimes think about situations where there isn't, like, if things are too big to fail, or if you're always sort of set to get like government funding, I think it is sort of hard to, as well as like caps on productivity and caps on income. I think it can be hard for individuals to have like enough incentive to do just like the best job and to actually change, because it is hard. It's hard to make improvements in large systems and large organizations, as we've experienced.
Yeah, Alex, what do you think?
Let's see. I mean, what is a system, right? It's designed to achieve a specific goal, and as soon as a specific goal changes, then you're changing the system. And system can always change. It's really a matter of who owns that system, and is that person going to change the different goal? And I think that's the really conversation that needs to take in place, where who are the people that are, having ownership in this, and do they have the power at any will to work on a new model or a new system? And if that's not being taken in place, it won't matter who's working on the system for it to change, because it's gonna be the same system. And that's just how I think.
Yeah, awesome. To try to jump into that again, based on what y'all said, it's really good. It made me think of a whole bunch of things. Yeah, and I think, one thing I think Jonathan put up is that, and the way I took it was that there's like social constructs that are created around the system to protect the system and prevent change or slow change. And it's literally just the life of the system, right? And I think we see that a lot in like our current, US political system and things like that, where, it's almost like a standstill or a stall, and it's very abstracted away from like the average citizen and their understanding of it intentionally, to then allow for, less understanding of what things are being passed on their behalf. And that that kind of that distance there allows for more autonomy and more freedom, for the people that are at that high level position to do things. Then they slap some title on top of it. And that also made me think of something that Josh said, which is this is something that's been bouncing around in my head for the past week randomly. Is that before you can change the world, you have to change yourself first, right? And I think why that's important here is that it's one thing to say it out loud and expose the problem, and it's another thing to be able to provide a solution to that problem. And I think the solution is often the harder part of that, and the solution is also something that if you can lead by example, then you could almost expose to other people that there is an alternative way. And until they can see that, and this is probably what we've seen with serverless adoption, for instance, is that, and this is the adoption curve with almost anything, right? At first, people don't really know what it is, and then as they learn, they have context for it, and then slowly that adoption increases. And so potentially, identifying these things and then thinking about how it could be structured, and then experimenting with that, trying it out, and then being able to create a case study around it, and then be able to present that to other people, that could have a potential ripple effect. So one thing I also wanted to bring up was, let's see, how do you tell people about the intangible part of the value that you're bringing, right? And so, for instance, let's say that, sometimes I'll come in and I'm so passionate and I wanted to change, and I was like serverless is not a technology, it's a point in time where we can do something different and go a different route, and this is a moment for the entire organization to improve. And it's not about serverless, it's not about software development, it's not about any of that, right? It's much bigger. And so let's say that intangible value, how do you explain something like that? Because everybody has something that they're bringing, and maybe it's a social media post, right? And on the surface, it's just a social media post, but maybe there's actually a lot of things behind that. And so how do you explain that type of value add?
I think for me, as someone with a background in marketing, a couple things that they talk about is understanding with starting with the end in mind. So really understand, and in order to do that, you have to understand what is the real problem, or what is the pain point, what is the thing that is keeping you awake at night for the reason why you're doing this initiative. And sort of the idea is if there's nothing, then you probably should be doing something else that actually is highly meaningful. But being able to, I think, with serverless, I think I've found this to be true, of being able to communicate that, this is more than just, oh, I could really use a fancier screwdriver. It's saying that we're actually going to get you a brand new toolbox, and it's going to be updated with modern tools that have been designed for, the next 10 years, rather than your great grandfather's Yankee screwdriver and all of the pre-electrical tools that you would use to build a house, which are super wild and funny. But we don't need to build a house that way anymore. You could, but we have, modern tech, high cutting edge technology. And with this toolbox, you're going to have to learn some new things, but there's a process, and this process, you're going to be amazed at how fast it's going to solve your problems and sort of get you to where you want to be. So I think having more of that, benefit focused mindset, and trying to weed out the problems early and getting everyone to articulate what the problems are up front is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that, being a marketing too, it's you have to clearly demonstrate to people why what you're trying to, I guess, even sell them or teach them about, in my case, is is it going to be something that saves you time, money, or resources? And that's like a base minimum. That's what people want to be able to, do. And that's where so much of the value proposition comes in, is does this product or does this thing help me save time? Right? Do I have to spend less time doing this thing because of these people? Does it save me any money? And that's the big value proposition of serverless, is that it can save you a lot, based on what it runs and stuff like that. Or does it save me resources? Right? Do I have to do I consult with these people and not have to hire, and whatever, right? Will they come in and help me on my system, stuff like that. And so a lot of the times you can you'll see in marketing, it's people saying like upgrade this or optimize this. You know, it's trying to get to that kind of hard to, you know, like intangible like piece of it of like, well, we're saving you money, time, and resources. Learn to upgrade or optimize. Like Josh said, like throw away your grandpa's toolbox and get, you know, something that's more efficient, because that's just going to save you time, money, and resources, right? Like in the end of it, that's kind of what it comes back to. It's like you have to sell to people, or you have to like really have people understand that by using the service or the product that you're getting, it's going to positively or beneficially impact them, you know. Unless it's like, I guess, clothing or something like that. Like that can be even more intangible. Of like, how do you like sell something like art or something even like subjective, right? Like, how do you say to somebody like, you need this piece of art on your wall, or like you need this hat, right? Like, why did I buy this, right? Like, why did I buy these pins? You know, like that's not saving me time, money, or resources necessarily. But I don't know.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
I think one thing that's really clear is that business at today's world don't really care too much about intangible values, and that's actually what I value the most in the recruiting that we do here at Serverless Crew. And my personal experiences when I joined Nike, prior to joining Nike, I was super excited, enthusiastic, like, hey, I'm gonna work on the campus, and like, you know, I'm a senior software engineer, you know, working in like heavily high performing distributed system. And I was, you know, pumping out like Jira tickets left and right, like taking it somebody else's ticket and performing like, you know, 3 to 4 times more than the engineers that were already there. And that's just, you know, that's my intangible value there, right? Me being passionate and just wanting to do great work. And 2 months later, like during the PI increment, I was voted like the best engineer of the month by the team, and they gave me like a $15 Audible gift card, which is kind of weak in my opinion. But after a while, I just realized it didn't matter. The value that I was putting it in wasn't being recognized enough, in my opinion. And I was just again a small ant in an army of giant corporation. And it it impacted me towards the end, and I definitely slowed down in terms of how much value I was putting it in, because I felt like my worth wasn't being shown or being appreciated enough, even though like it's my natural value that I was bringing in, just because I was so emotionally just excited about it. And that's honestly one of the biggest reasons why I left Nike, is because those weren't being appreciated. And I realized that that's just the nature of these corporations, and it takes years and years to be recognized. And I just, coming from a startup before that, it just wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing your experience there, Alex. I think it's very helpful for anybody listening to kind of hear about some of the, you know, you go to a big company like Nike, you get there and you do really well, and then, you know, what does that actually, you know, turn into afterwards, right? Did you end up as a home run, and then you felt like you hit a home run, and then they promoted you to the major leagues, and in some cases you get a $15 gift card, and yeah, that doesn't feel too great. And I also worked at Nike, and I love Nike. I love the story of Shoe Dog. I love Phil Knight. I love all these things. I'm not saying that if Phil Knight's done anything bad, I'm not supporting anything like that. I'm just talking about literally the story of, the rags to riches type of thing. In this world, you know what I mean? Like every other day, somebody is like coming out because they think there's some bad stuff that they've done. So I'm definitely not promoting any of that. But when it comes to Nike, when I got there, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the thing. I've got a whiteboard desk that goes like up and down with a button, and they gave me all this Mac products, and I was coming from like a code school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I made it, right? I was in the innovation engineering department, which was like super cool. Helping build like machine learning stuff, and that was awesome, and got me into serverless. So it really helped like my journey for sure. Once we did build it though, and I started to see a little bit more of what happens after you go from because I was on a very small team, and I was kind of in, they like to say it was like a startup inside the mothership of Nike, right? And so I was kind of shielded a little bit from maybe some of the stuff that you had the experience with, Alex. But then I started to get closer to that as we started to actually get more towards like a released product. And that's where I started to see more of the cracks of a big company like that, where what is my role now? Am I like just purely maintaining this thing and people don't really care about it too much? And like, we got to like we got to scrap for like we got to fight for any scraps that we get, and everybody's trying to like leg up over each other. And so I completely, the thing that you just said is like, you need to find a place, the thing that I wrote down, you need to find a place where the value you add has a closer relation to what comes back to you, either through monetary means or skills or some other avenue, maybe your ability to be creative and see that kind of ripple effect take place. And so on that note, let me cue it back to Jonathan and Josh here. What do you think? Is this an important topic around finding places where the value you bring has a closer relation to what comes back? And how does that affect the way that you think about your own life, career, or advice for other people?
Yeah.
Go, Jonathan.
Go, Jonathan. This episode brought to you by Audible and Nike, right, guys? We're never going to get our sponsorship deal now. But I don't know. I think it's really important feeling valued, obviously, at a company, right? That's why like positions like HR matter and stuff like that, human resources, not just because of like what may happen within a business, but like helping the members of it feel valued. Like I get so many emails even now being like, hey, show your company that you love them by ordering all your employees like this gift package from us. Like there's a big value proposition in making sure that the people in your team are happy and feel valued. And like a big reason why I left grad school when I did was that in a weird way, I was kind of like, not to toot my own horn too much if anyone from JFK watches this. I don't know why you would, but hey, if you guys did, I was kind of like this like rock star almost. So people were like, wow, Johnny really like, he's really intuitive when it comes to therapy and all this. And I didn't feel that way. I felt like I hadn't earned that amount of respect. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of like an imposter syndrome that was happening there, but there was also kind of this feeling of like, they're like, well, Johnny is already set up so much that he doesn't need any guidance or help, and we're just leave him on his own and let him drown or figure it out. And it kind of felt like I was given almost too much responsibility and respect right away. And I was like, no, guys, you need to like I need help still, or I need to be able to come to a teacher and be like, what do I do with this client, and not have them be like, well, I'm sure whatever you figure out will be great because you're smart. It's kind of a trade-off where I don't know. It's something I say to like my sister a lot is that you need to be a parent, not a friend to my niece, right? And like in the same way, like you need to like to be a parent, you need to be nurturing and give guidance, but also give praise and positive reinforcement when it's necessary. And I feel like almost being like in a company, it's almost like you need to kind of have that same mental philosophy of being like a parent. You give tough love when you need it and guidance, but also you need to be able to give positive reinforcement and praise to the team when they do well. You can't just be like the mean stepdad or like the nurturing mom. You kind of have to be like this duality of it, right? You gotta have a a balanced and healthy family structure. Sorry, I talk about grad school and now my head's just like talk about dependency and like talk about your coworkers unhealthy whatever things. But getting back onto topic, I think it's a big issue actually of like feeling respected and feeling like you bring value to a company, or that the value that you bring is being properly weighed, whether that's like you get a $15 Audible card when it should definitely have been at least $16, or if you're like a first year in grad school, everyone's like, nah, you're already a doctor, basically. Just do whatever you want. Mess up any client you want. You know what I mean? It's like, that's too much power. This is a human being I'm working with. And I don't think I'm comfortable if this is like the structure of the system I'm in. And that's why I left. I was like, I was too trusted. Maybe that's just imposter syndrome. I don't know. That's a topic for next time, though. I'll let Josh jump in. I think I'm kind of rambling.
I think in your situation, it's like, what is it? Especially when it comes to the world of like healthcare and like human life and like health, like the health sciences. As right. Someone who used to be a biochemist and thought about becoming both like a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist, just sort of like there's a certain level of professional certification, and what I'm trying to think, it's not like rigor, but sort of not like rigor or bedside manner, but there's like proper operating procedures that like one should have. And in no way in my mind, I would hope that, you know, like if I went to see a doctor, that, you know, they were like, I had a team of experts that if I have a question, I can ask them and they'll give me some advice, rather than walking in on my doctor being like, I know if I have any problems, they'll tell me just wing it and my hunch will be good enough. Like that isn't like, when it comes to like health, and really anything, I hope someone's like uneducated hunch isn't the only thing separating like a good and a bad decision. So I think, you know, part of that is like you being able to understand, Jonathan, like seeing like the risk profile that exists. Cause I also think that is a big aspect of like, how do I value myself as like as an employee or an executive or a team member? Is like, well, what is the value I'm bringing? What is the risk I'm responsible for and like owning, and how does that play out? And I think like in your situation, you are able to recognize like an unequal distribution of risk for like the reward for your role, and that the organization institution wasn't respecting that and didn't seem to take your like, you know, your flag seriously, your feedback seriously, and then you made the right decision. Because, you know, if someone say something did happen and you were the person responsible for them, you know, if they sued you or their family sued you, like, do you 100% know that you wouldn't be liable at all for anything that would happen? Like, did you have the guarantee that your institution would stand up for you for like a health related matter? So, you know, we always have to make that calculus. Hopefully in our lives and professions, we aren't, you know, the ones holding legal responsibility for certain things, but, you know, as executive team members, like I know Ryan, and to some point, like me, there are some aspects where, you know, we definitely do. And that's part of the game that we're playing there. But I definitely can agree, and have definitely thought about sort of this context of, you know, what is the value that I bring, and how is compensation or what I'm getting out of it, like align with my goals. And I think I think it's something that people should always be asking themselves, because I luckily, like throughout school, had like a mentor who fully believed that everyone had the ability to learn how to punch their own ticket in life by being uniquely them, and by being interested in the things that they're interested in. And I've thankfully been able to take that framework and apply it to my own life to much success. But it's something that, you know, I think you have to work for more, especially in the current state of the world and the current state of education. It's not something that people really will teach you. Like I believe like my family are all like sort of first or second generation, like immigrants from Italy. So they're like, just get an education and you'll be fine. But, you know, their education makes you one of those factory workers from the beginning of the conversation that we had, where you can just expect to work 40 hours and then, you know, you'll promote smart people. But now everyone, like more and more people I see, like they have to get master's degrees, and then they sort of get like shoot into just sort of like a entry level position, or entry level positions just for like service workers. It's like 5 years experience, but how do you get experience without being able to get the entry level position? It's such a challenging situation. And I think the best way to communicate during those situations is having an understanding of the value from like the other side of who's looking for the job, and being able to communicate value based rather than like commodity work or price based. Always having an understanding of the value you want to provide is super essential.
Yeah, what do you think about this topic, Alex? I'll toss you in.
To be honest, I'm a little lost on the topic. We were talking about so many different things, but
okay, I can bring it back up.
Okay.
So you need to find a place where you need to find a place where the value you add has a closer relation to what comes back, and then basically saying like what type of role does that play? And I guess you answered it earlier actually with the Nike scenario. That's where this came from. So yeah. So go ahead with what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you, Ryan, and that is, what from your experience led you down the road of like creating a serverless company, like creating a serverless consultancy yourself? Because like what led you to be able to sort of see there's value and it's worth taking that risk? Because that is a hard decision to be able to make, as well as a hard problem to be able to see and feel confident in in taking. Because I think the way things are sort of presented in like an academic context, as well as like at least the circle that I grew up in, it's like, it's something that, you know, you never do because it's too scary or too risky. So what sort of teed you up to be able to make a decision like that?
Oof. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to get so passionate. I run out of breath here. But yeah, that's where it's going. So yeah, I think one thing that I try to tell people only when I'm very comfortable with those people, but I'll share it now as well, is that the way that I think about it is that a lot of people I feel like are wrongly optimizing for the short term. So that would be the extra $1 an hour, $2 an hour raise. And I think that I kind of ascribe to the idea that I don't want the $2 an hour raise, right? I like the idea that was kind of floated around work for somebody for free, right? To then get the knowledge required so that I can go from $10 an hour to $50 an hour in 3 months later, because now I have the knowledge. So I did sacrifice whatever that calculation is, but I make that back way faster after I actually have those knowledge and skills and can apply it. And so I think like early on, I was looking for ways to kind of jumpstart that, because I knew that the only difference between myself, and I think this is like the growth mindset idea, is that the only difference between myself and let's say like Jeff Bezos, or between like Elon Musk or like a NASA astronaut or a rock star that plays like guitar really well, is just like time, right? And so if you could stop time, right? And and of course, you have the capacity, all the different things that are neurological and that you're born with, like around like some people struggle, they have other things that this makes this difficult. But for like a large percentage of people, if you could pause time and you could just work on that one thing, right? You would get to the point where you would be a master pianist. You would get to the point where you'd be a master guitarist. You would be able to understand rocket engineering design as well as Elon Musk does. Or be able to understand how to make a two-way market, like Jeff Bezos did. And so I think that's like a key thing. And so then it becomes like, okay, well, if that's the case and it's just purely a time thing, and there's like knowledge that's required to do that job, and I can gain that knowledge just through purely time, then how do I basically get to that knowledge faster? And I think that there's like a concept that's taught through schooling and the more traditional system, which is you have to climb that corporate ladder. And by climbing that ladder, you then get access to that knowledge, which then allows you to then jump into that new area that you get more monetary benefits, maybe 6 hours a week versus 8 hours, or 6 hours a day versus 8 hours a day, maybe one day off, maybe extra vacation time, etc. The way that I went like, that's kind of just propaganda. And that's kind of just pumped into our system to basically create like, cogs in the machine that will work with the idea that they'll get that reward later on. And I didn't ascribe to that. I thought that was very early on. I thought there's a different way to do this. And so I sought that out. And I don't know who put that in my head. I'm very fortunate and grateful, and also very aware that that's not a normal thing that happens. And so when that did happen, I sought that out through, I have a talk actually called Mindset that you can probably find on YouTube somewhere, where I actually have like 8 or 12 different mentors that I basically liked. And one of them was like The Internet's Own Boy, if you've seen that documentary about Aaron Swartz, the creator of Reddit, also the creator of Creative Commons at like 13, 14 years old. He said, what is the most important thing you could be working on in the world right now? And if you're not working on it, why aren't you, right? And so I always had that kind of in the back of my head too, before Serverless Guru started, which was, how can I put in absolutely everything to then get to this next thing, and not based on somebody signing it off, right? Like I wasn't looking for a stamp of approval. I just looked at it from like a purely, let's break it down. Let's break it down. I don't know, for first principle thinking or whatever that would be called, but let's reverse engineer it, right? To do a senior software developer job at Nike, what do they do on a daily basis? Great, I can do all those things. I don't have the experience on paper, but I can do your job already. So like, what is the difference? And the reality of it is that once I kind of had that mindset, and once I had stuff that was actually evidence of that, there was no distinction there. And of course, that wasn't the traditional path. I didn't get a degree in computer science. I didn't have like 3 or 4 years of background experience. The code skill helped, but it didn't get me all the way there. And so in reality, I just kind of looked at like, what do I need to get like tangible skill wise? And then also, how can I kind of jumpstart, this whole thing? So that's my long form answer of a few different things. Josh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I think I love your long form answer. And I love like this one thread that I really connected with is like, like having to have like a big macro goal or like a good macro plan as far like this, like what's the most important thing you could be working on, and if you're not doing that, why are you not doing that? I think that's such a great question. I think there's a quote from Bill Gates and it says something like, people will overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but they will actually underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And then something else that I've had another teacher sort of talk to me about is like, well, you know, what is your desired life output 25 years from now? Like 25 years from now, what do you want to say that like, I'm glad I've accomplished this, or I'm glad this has happened? And you know, that's not something I necessarily haven't thought that far out yet very granularly, but it's something that I'm definitely working on. And I think like being able to answer those sort of questions, it's really scary because, you know, I don't know, it's just really terrifying to be able to sort of look at like, these are the discrete moments of my life. Like I only have X amount of years, and thinking about like those going by, like it's definitely like a mortality thing, but it is for me also like very invigorating. And I can definitely say that like what I have thought about in the vision of my life, definitely working at the capacity I do at Serverless Guru, 100% plays into that. And it makes me able to sort of like show up every day and be excited and be really, really present and wanting to make like every single hour worth it. And not worth it because I'm really hoping I'm going to get like recognized, or, you know, hopefully I can get that $16 or $17 Audible gift card. Like that isn't my motivating factor. Thankfully, you know, it's if it happens, it's a bonus. You know, heck, I'll even take a $14 Audible gift card. You know, hey, you know, an audiobook's an audiobook. But to have like some intrinsic motivation, whether it's sort of like this will pay off in the long term, or this, just having intrinsic motivation is so important. And I think I could definitely see that in your story, Ryan, which is awesome.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Yeah. So I think I wrote something in here, which is, yeah, I was going to say, you know, don't seek validation from others. Their experience is not the rule. It's an opinion. That goes for me as well. So my experience is purely my opinion based on the things that took place in my life. It's my truth because of the circumstances and, you know, X, Y, Z that I was in. I had some hard stuff happen in my early life. I had some, you know, tragedies. Everyone, you know, most people do. And then I had people around me that kind of helped kick off that stuff. Early life, you know, like 9 years old or something. You know, I would bring a fishing tackle box with like rubber bands inside, and then sell that on the playground to little kids. And that was just like a natural thing for me. And my dad was like a salesperson, and he kind of, you know, put that in my head. I can't remember what he said to me because it was so long ago, but I just know that it happened. And so potentially subconsciously, I was like growing a little bit faster there. But I think it's also important to have people around you that are willing for you to move higher than they are. And I think that that's really critical, and it's very hard for a lot of people. I think everybody on this call, I want everybody on this call currently, and anybody listening, I want y'all to do better and do more than I've ever done, right? I don't want y'all to be, you know, like underneath the, you know, quote unquote accomplishments, the society says accomplishments, right? But like the idea is like, I think some people in the traditional corporate ladder structure, the person giving you advice is also giving you advice based on their experience and based on their journey of climbing up that ladder. The idea that you could do what took them 10 years in 1 year, that's not, and you can move higher, you could be their boss now. Like that whole thing is really hard for some people to grapple with. And so I think it's really important to understand as well the context and the motivation and where it's coming from behind the person that's you know, kind of sharing that type of opinion, and then to be very highly critical of it, and, you know, of course, then weigh it with your own self and what you want to accomplish. So, yeah, awesome. Well, I think to close this out, why don't we do a fun one? Let's see. We got a couple of questions here from Jonathan. They put in. How about this one? Would you rather run a country or a business? And since you created the question, Jonathan, I'll let you go first.
Okay, that's a good one. Let's see, a country or a business? Man, you know, I want to own a restaurant one day. That's kind of a business, right? And then I'm going to turn that into like an empire, like McDonald's. So it's kind of like a country, like its own small country, right? I don't know. I think I'm more equipped for a business. I think, you know, a country, that's a lot of people. That's a unless I could be like my own country, right? It could be my own island country. Maybe I'll take over Puerto Rico, right? And I'll just come over and I'll just I'll start there. I'll open my own little chain restaurant and then slowly take over the country. You know, like, wow, all these burgers are so good. We should vote him into the I don't know, into Parliament in England. Yeah, I really am struggling with this answer, you guys. I think I'd rather do a business though, and that's gonna be my take on it. That's my hot take. I'd rather have a business. Don't give me a country, please. I'm floundering even thinking about it.
I'll eat at your restaurant, and I won't eat at your country. So you better make a business instead. No, for me, I think what is it? I would run a country's like a big job because like what is it? I don't have any like political experience. I've definitely thought of running for local office at some point, and I potentially will. I think so. I'm just too busy right now. But I definitely think we need to have more, just like more overlap of like very efficient operational procedures, just like in government, and just have people who are, what is it? It's like the intention does not equal impact. I think we have a lot of good people that I've met, like working in government and local and where I'm from, as well as like in NGOs and nonprofits, which are great. But I also think they don't necessarily have the sort of like the agileness and the velocity of someone who works in like technology. And it's like, oh no, let's speed things up a little bit. So I think that could be beneficial. So maybe not country, but I'll let you know, like once I'm commissioner of like, District 24, you can then ask me that again, and then I will let you know.
Oh man, if I had a choice, I would probably try to run a country just for the simple reason. How many successful businesses are there compared to successful government / successful system? And that's a motivational factor for me to improve upon the fact that people are great at running business. People are not great at running government. And that's something that motivates me, that I want to make a better system in place that everyone, and there is no perfect system, right? But what if there is? What if, have we talked about that? Have we talked about reforming different types of governments? There hasn't been a talk like that. So that's something that interests me enough to want to try something like that. And nowhere near experienced enough to ever dare to try, but we'll see.
I would live in Alex's country.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't think you guys should eat my restaurant though. I would live in Alex's country though, for sure, and Josh's district, whatever. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I was gonna say that here in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of opportunity actually for new food ideas and new things like that. I would actually say that to everybody listening. I feel like being in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of things that can be, there's a lot of things that can be improved, and also there's a lot of things that can be expanded on, right? And so, if you have ideas, if you're working in tech, if you're a startup, if you're anything like in any of these different areas, or you just want to see the type of, like right now, it's almost like we're so many layers up in the States or whatever, that it's almost like you're making like micro improvements on top of a system that's already like pretty good. But in Puerto Rico, it feels like there's a few layers down that they haven't been built up at the same level as, like, I don't know, let's say California or Utah or something like that, right? So I feel like there's ways to like improve things here, and also in the same time help like lift up people with like new opportunities and job skills, and kind of not like change the culture into what the States is, but expand on the culture and bring more stuff to already a great island. Ego wise, my ego talking, I think that I would run a country. Similar reasons to Alex. I think that it's probably the most ambitious and most able to fail and hard thing to understand. I mean, there's people that spend their entire life studying our existing system, and I've heard even people riff on the idea that like because there's a right and a left, it's what creates balance, right? Like because of this, like if everything was left or everything was right, it would like balance too far to one side, and then that would create like some car crash type scenario. But because of that type of like balance of thing, it's like we have to go deeper into the topic versus just being like, yeah, I agree. And so that's very nuanced, and that's something I don't understand, so I can't really speak on it. But I would say that I think that running a country gives the potential for the most possible impact and good. And so I think that if anybody listening has like a different opinion or perspective than what you're currently seeing in the country that you live in, then yeah, maybe it would be good to kind of, as what you're doing as well as you're leading by example, you're influencing, and you can do that in the private sector as well. But that's my answer. My answer would be, let's go for the big bang for your buck, like running a country. Again, ego. And hopefully there's a whole bunch of systems where it's like, I'm just, I would just be a figurehead and there's a whole team of people behind that are actually making decisions. And, I just get to talk on the microphone. But yeah, that's my answer. So coming to a close, final thoughts, Jonathan, Josh, Alex, what do y'all think as we come to a close on this beautiful Friday, September 24th?
I feel like I copped out on that. Like you're all down to run a country. I'm like, yeah, I'll run like a McDonald's. I don't know. I changed mine to a country now, guys. I want to be cool. Yeah, I want to affect local government at small levels and build it all up and create my own dystopian, like brand new world-esque. We're all gonna be eating people one day in my country, guys. We're all gonna I'm gonna make what is it, Soylent Green or whatever. So yeah.
You can join me in my congressional district, and then we can just be commissioners. I'm not gonna run a country yet, but I will run for local office one day probably. I was going to do that. What was it before? Potentially, I was planning for something before I joined Serverless Guru, but then that happened, and things are working out the way they are. But no, I think I think I would like to. I think there's like such a, what is it, like pressure in our culture to be like, you either have to be like to be like the number one, but like for every like leader, there needs to be like very accomplished and reliable number 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6, and 7, because that's the only way things are actually going to get done. So you don't need to be like the head person. I want to see and like lead a movement of incredible supporters and those who can be the solid bedrock for consistency in order that makes results happen. So I would encourage people to do that, whether it's in your corporate position or your government agency. Like if you're willing to not take the credit, you can get a lot more done. That's one thing I've seen.
Ooh, I like that. It's a nice closing statement. That's better than me saying that I'm going to eat people. So.
Well, I was about to say I'm going to declare war on both of y'all's countries. My country is the best. Y'all's country is really good. Okay. Alex, what are your final thoughts?
Nothing. Just these talks have been great. I think just stay ambitious, stay curious. It gets you a long ways in terms of if you're passionate about something, there's always rewards at the end. And not that I strive for the reward in itself, but that's what drives me to do better. And being ambitious and curious really helps with that. So I think that kind of idea revolves around the topics that we've discussed today.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode, everybody in the audience, at home, abroad, wherever you are. Mars, maybe. Who knows? This could be being watched in 2100, right? If so, nice to see you. But yeah, that's it. So Leadership Rocks episode number 3. Make sure to follow, subscribe, like the video. You found it valuable. Share it out to your social media webs. And we'll see you next time in the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.